Randy, you're from Marshville,
Yeah.
North Carolina, the son of, let's see, you had 6 kids in that house, and you were
Yeah.
the second,
Yeah.
and the son of a turkey farmer,
Yeah.
and he was also in the textile industry. Is that
Yeah.
right?
His mama was. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Your mom was in the textiles, and your daddy
Yeah.
farmed turkeys,
Yeah.
right?
He was a rancher, kind of home builder.
Yeah.
He was multi-talented in that aspect, and he also was a horse trainer. So he always had horses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Randy would often say that his daddy was the best horse trainer he'd ever met, and indeed he was. He taught
Really?
Randy what he knew, and Dennis too. And like one of the
Wow.
horses you saw down there, Preacher, Randy could get him to do like 12 tricks, 12 or 13 tricks where he kneel down, you know,
Yeah.
and lay down, roll over, play dead, smile, nod yes or no. It's just, you know, it was incredible watching
Wow.
the companionship, I guess, that he had with horses.
Right.
He's with horses and babies. He just has a way. I don't know
Gosh.
if it's the voice, the
That's
spirit.
probably part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
just
the smile too, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what his daddy
Yeah.
you know, did
So-
for a living. His mama was in the textiles.
Got it. So coming from that world, like, did it ever cross your mind as a young man that you would become Randy Travis, the country music Hall of Famer, the 7-time Grammy
No.
winner? Did anybody see that coming?
No.
Wow. What a story. So as a preacher, I'd really like to know a little bit about how your faith has played a part in both of your lives, really. And I know y'all go to church now. You'll have a home church. Mary, did you grow up going to church?
Did, yes.
Yeah.
Is that why,
Was-
are you a Baptist girl?
Well, I was raised Episcopalian.
Really?
Yes, and then in high school, went to Baptist church in Plano,
Yeah.
First Baptist in Plano. They had a group called the Revelees, and we were high school kids that in the summertime toured and sang at bases
All right.
for the military,
Yeah.
called the Revelees. And so then I went to Baylor, so that was Baptist. So I have a lot of Baptist blood in me,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But raised Episcopalian as
Yeah.
a youngster, yeah.
I didn't know they had Episcopalians in Northeast Texas, but
There are a few of
a
us.
few of you, yeah. All right. Randy, did you grow up with going to church with your family? A little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
Plan for the
Yep.
pappy. No, his mama was very
I love
faithful.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
She was a sweet, sweet lady,
Yeah.
soft-mannered, soft-tempered. And Randy would tell me, he said, Mama would get up and go to church,
Yeah.
and it was usually by herself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And he said, and I was too much of a rebel, and Dad wasn't interested in it.
Yeah. At that point,
It's like pray for the fish when Harold went to
Yeah.
church, right? And so
praise for the fish.
pray for the fish.
Yeah.
So Mama was kind of the one. He goes, and I always watched her, and I always knew that's where I needed to be.
Yeah.
But as the young rebel that I was, I didn't act on that. But
Yeah.
I think just her living that life, she was that Bible that he was reading.
Yeah.
It just hadn't sunk in yet. So
Wow.
when he decided to change that, then he got baptized in Ashland City
Really?
in Tennessee in 2001, I believe. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Baptized in Ashland, Tennessee.
Yeah.
In
Ashland City.
Ashland City
Yeah.
in 2001. Wow. They put you under the water?
Yep.
Yeah. Full immersion?
Yeah.
Pastor
Wow.
Harless.
Really?
Yeah, and
That
it
is
was
awesome.
It was interesting because he would talk about how because he'd done a lot of the country music and the gospels, but it was when he just made that decision that that's where I want to go, what I want to do, and I want to make that public. He the next year is when 3 wooden crosses came across his
Like it was
radar.
meant to be.
And then the next year, it became number one. You know, the gospel charts, the country charts, and the pop charts.
Yeah.
So it was one of the only Christian gospel songs to be number one on, the country charts. And they said that one thing that they thought was funny was it was the only time a gospel song had the word hooker in it. Now, how do you get away with that?
Yeah. Well,
But it tells a story.
it tells a story,
Yeah.
and Jesus hung out with some of them,
Well, yeah.
some of those folks.
Yeah, he did. And that's the song. It was, about redemption.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. It's a beautiful
anyway,
song.
Beautiful song.
And it probably, at that point in your life, it probably was coming from your heart too,
Yeah.
because you had been baptized and
Yep.
you had finally surrendered to God. And I just think about you getting baptized in 2001. How many of your mother's prayers were answered. That day?
Yeah.
So I know that the word is, from other interviews that you've done, the feeling is that the relationship with your father was a little complicated at times.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
At a young age, it wasn't always pleasant to be around
No.
your dad. Would you say that he was, when you were a kid, that he was abusive? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Physically?
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine that must have affected you in several different ways. I mean, for a boy's father to do that, you must have faced some struggles because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Later in life, did he ever, I'm just curious if he ever came back and apologized to you or said, I'm sorry, or did that ever cross his lips?
No.
Did you ever forgive him?
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah, his dad was, he had an alcohol problem. And when Randy said some days they never knew when he was going to come home drunk. Or, he said when he was nice, he was so sweet, so nice. And when he was drinking, he was terrible.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any gray area. It was black or white.
Yeah.
And he said they would hope he was coming home sober these days. But he did get violent. One time he was getting violent with Randy's mom, and Randy I think was about 9, 10, 11 years old, and went and pulled him off his mama, which made his daddy mad.
Yeah.
And so Randy, he ran out of the house and down the road and into a corn patch, and he said he stayed there for 3 days.
3 days.
To wait for his dad to kind of cool off.
Scared to go home?
Yeah.
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 But he was, and he loved hard. His daddy loved hard. He was, I guess, from a generation, much like my dad, which was from North Carolina too. They were military, and my dad was military, and everything was, it was his way,
Yeah.
And if he would tell you to do something, it wasn't just a suggestion.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, right.
And I just think that was a generation of men that had grown up in tough times, and they were really, they didn't know how to be soft. They
Yeah.
didn't know how to be, they couldn't show weakness.
Yeah.
And the I love yous and the I'm sorries didn't roll off their lips very often.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's how
later,
they were raised.
that's the way they were raised.
Yeah.
They didn't know any different. And thank God that young men and the dads and the fathers that we have now, they're able to be softened and not so
Yeah.
calloused and hard, because it must be a miserable being,
Sure.
just hating the world and everybody around it
Yeah.
and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But his dad came around
Yeah.
later on, and as a matter of fact, he was supposed to be at the Hall of Fame induction in 2016,
Really?
and he passed away the Saturday prior from a heart attack, just instantly.
That's heartbreaking.
So I know that was what he wanted, more than anything, is for Randy to get to the Hall of Fame, and he
Well,
did.
he
so
knew
he
about
got he got to see that one too.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And he had a guitar in his hand and a horse under his butt from the time he was 3 years old.
Really?
Well,
Randy did?
his daddy
His
made
daddy
sure he did.
made
Yeah.
sure he did.
Yeah, all 6 of them played an instrument,
Really?
and any of them that wanted a horse, he made sure they had one.
Yep.
But when he went to Miss Kate when he was 9 and Ricky was 10 they were going to take guitar lessons.
Yeah.
But his dad said, well, one of you has to sing because we've got to have a singer in this group. Because all the kids, either piano or drums or bass guitars or acoustic, they were
Yeah.
all. So he even had a stage built at
Yeah.
their little house, their
Is
farmhouse.
that right?
Yeah.
And so he said, well, one of you's got to sing. And Ricky said, well, I'm not singing. And he was the oldest one, so he got to pick. So then Miss Kate said, well, Randy, you got to sing then.
Yeah.
And that was the start.
He opened his mouth to start singing. She says, I think we got something here.
How old was Randy at that point? More or less?
9.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That was before he had the rich baritone then, probably.
Yeah. Before it had, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. What a great story.
Yeah.
And as complicated as it was with your dad, I mean, as best I can tell, he did encourage your
A
music.
A lot.
Yeah,
He did. He was
that
very
interesting?
encouraging.
yeah. It's like so many stories that you hear. It's the alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the alcohol that that really instigates all that that negative and abusive behavior. And then
Yeah.
without the alcohol, they can be just as loving as anybody
Yeah.
else. Did you ever doubt that your dad loved you?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's normal in an abusive situation.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that would shape you as a young man growing up, even as a teenager. I've heard you had some struggles as a teenager.
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, that just goes to show that, as a parent, your children are watching.
That's right.
You become, because they hear and they're painting the picture.
That's right.
And so kids see that, and I think Randy thinking that, because his dad was the same kind of, I mean, if he didn't like something or something in town,
Yeah.
he was hard to deal with.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that was the role model that he had, and he had a grandpa he loved so much, and so that was good for him to be with him. And then he had a grandma that lived right next door to him, and her name was Gaga, and they would sit out on the porch, right?
Yeah.
And Gaga had her little her dip in her, or her chew or snuff or something, and her bourbon at 5:30 in the afternoon. They'd sit on the porch and just talk.
Yeah.
And he loved Gaga, and those were the people that
A lot.
got him through,
That is awesome.
along with his mom, who was the angel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your teenage years, middle school, high school, did you start drinking in that time?
Yeah.
Would that become a problem for you pretty early in life? That get you in trouble?
No.
No, you got in trouble sober
Yeah.
back in those days.
No, I did it all by myself.
I like the honesty,
My
Randy.
friend Jen didn't have anything to do with it. That's funny. Never been asked
That's
that.
great. I heard you broke into a church once.
Yeah.
What happened there? Has he told you that story? You didn't know
No,
about that one?
Well, I heard about it, but I
Tell
didn't
you
really
what.
hear the story. But, is that good or bad? You want to go to church so bad you break in? Maybe it's a good thing.
That's
Maybe
not how
God
I read
was
the
telling
story.
him something. Yeah, I don't think that's the way the story was written, was it?
No.
We all get in trouble as teenagers, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you singing through your teenage years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
At church?
Yeah.
Just about anywhere you could, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, did you say the kids had a band together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How long
Yeah.
did that last?
Well, several of them, they all took music lessons,
Yeah.
like I said, but some of them just didn't take to it like
No.
others, which is, would be normal out of 6. Surely you're not going to get all 6 of them.
Yeah.
But they, Ricky and Randy pretty much lasted the longest.
Yeah.
And so they had, I guess it was called the Trawick Brothers, which was his
Brothers, right?
surname.
Yeah.
And so Ricky and Randy went around. I guess Dad took them to all of the fiddlers conventions and VFWs, and anywhere he could get them in to sing,
Yeah.
they would go sing. And it was, the Trawick Brothers.
Yeah.
I have a
So-
friend whose name is Trawick,
Oh.
Really?
and he's
Okay.
very upset with you that you did not keep that name when you got big and famous.
Okay.
That's
And he
funny.
wanted me to ask you why you didn't keep that name. And I told him that it takes forever and ever, amen, to explain how to spell that name. And so Travis is easier. A lot.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was when he went to Nashville finally.
Yep.
The first album he ever cut was under Randy Ray.
Really?
Yeah,
didn't
because
know
that
that.
Trawick was so difficult for people. And it's so simple, seems like.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not anything complicated in it, but
Yep.
he was getting all kinds of
Wow.
spellings, and so they changed it to Randy Ray.
It worked out.
Yeah, and
In the
then when
end.
when Warner signed him, Martha Sharp said he can't be Randy Ray. So in the middle of the night, she said she bolted up. She goes, Travis, that's it, Travis. So
Wow.
that's
yeah.
where Travis
It
came
worked.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I'm from, everybody's middle name is Ray.
Really? Oh,
I'm Eric Ray. And
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. Billy Ray, Bobby Ray. Everybody's got Ray in the middle.
Yep.
So,
That's cute.
Yeah.
Yep.
So y'all entered into a bunch of competitions, and was there like a breakthrough moment, like in North Carolina, that a competition that you won, or something that happened that really got you propelled?
It was in Charlotte, and he and his brother entered the competition, and they won the first competition, and they were going to the next one, and Ricky dropped out, so Randy went solo.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he ended up winning that competition,
Yeah.
and that was at that time Lib and her husband Frank owned that honky tonk.
Yeah.
And so Lib loved his voice and thought she could do something with it.
Yeah.
She has good instincts.
Sure.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so then she and Frank got divorced, and Randy and Lib eventually moved to Nashville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the breakthrough, I think, between just playing these small venues and
Okay.
going on to bigger things.
Yeah.
So.
So Randy, at that point in your life, right before you're getting big time, was God a part of your life at all? Like a relationship with God?
No.
Not so much. And at that point, your tunnel vision, singular focus is to make it in the country music world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were well on your way. You made the move to Nashville. What year was that, more or less?
That would have probably been 1980 or 81.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Maybe late 70s, 79, 80. It's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you take off right away in Nashville, or did it take a while?
No.
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 It's a struggle for a while?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, he worked for it. It was a good 10 long years of, know your two country from all the labels. It's just, he paid his dues, but I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
I think if they can do that and they've got that stick-to-itiveness, then I think in the long run that's better for them.
Yeah, and they're
Sometimes
not
when they make it overnight and they haven't paid their dues, they didn't have to work for it. It doesn't last long.
Yeah. So did you work some odd jobs around Nashville before you hit it big?
The Palace.
Yeah.
You worked at the Palace?
Yeah.
He worked at the Palace cooking.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, cooking and cleaning at the Palace, and then he'd jump on the stage.
Would they let him
take
do
his
it?
Apron off and throw his jacket on, and he'd get up there and sing a couple of songs.
Yeah.
So, and the Nashville Palace was right across. It was down in Music Valley, east of Nashville, and it was right across the street from where the Grand Ole Opry was.
Yeah.
And so they had a lot of residual visits from people that were at the Grand Ole Opry,
Sure.
including little Jimmy Dickens.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he came and heard him one night. And he says, "Son, I want you to come over to the Opry with me tonight."
Yeah.
And
Are
Randy
you
did,
kidding?
and Randy thought that he was just going to have him, in the wings watching and just being at the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
But when they got there, Jimmy said, "No, you're going out there to sing in my place," And Randy said, "I was so nervous."
Yeah.
And off in his, in his peripheral, he could see little Jimmy over there side stage. He said, "I was so nervous."
Yeah.
But
Did
then-
it go well?
Yeah.
good.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say no. I was like, I think it went pretty good.
Yeah.
Was that sort of the next turning point in your career?
I think so.
Yeah.
You got some people's attention?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and he, little Jimmy, he said, I just wished you would have gone away. Wasn't sitting there looking at me because it made me so nervous.
Yeah.
But it wasn't long after that Martha Sharp, she was head of A&R at Warner, and she went out to listen. I guess he was stirring,
Yeah.
people were were starting to hear. And she went out to watch him and visited with him a little bit and left. And he had already been turned down by Warner 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
So he didn't think much of it and thought, well, there's another one that's come and gone. 5 days later, she said, we've got the paperwork. We're going to sign you with Warner. And it just happened. It was a whirlwind after that.
Well, I bet, yeah.
Yeah, it all happened so fast from then on.
Oh, man.
But yeah, there was a lot of Jimmy, and they had asked him to join the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
I think you were 27 years old. He was the youngest male
Yeah.
artist to ever be
At 27?
a
Wow.
member of the Grand Ole Opry.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So I'll ask again, at 27, is God anywhere on your radar at that point?
No.
Not really.
No.
Yeah. You didn't find yourself praying, or even when you were struggling, would you ask him for help or anything like that?
No.
Not so much. Yeah. You were doing your own thing,
Yeah.
making your own way,
Yeah.
and you made it.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when you make it as a 27-year-old hotshot from a small town in North Carolina, suddenly you've got fame. I don't know how the fortune part works, if that came right away or later, but you've definitely got some wind in your sails. How does that affect you as a young man? Is it even possible to keep your head on straight when you make it to that point?
No.
No.
He kept his.
Yeah.
I think Randy was known to be. He was full of humility. Randy
Really?
was never the hot shot.
Yeah.
If you ever see any of his interviews, he was always the little shy kid that that just scoots his feet around, going, I don't know what happened. He was always that. He was never.
That is awesome.
Yeah, he was never full of himself. He never forgot where he came from. He was always kind.
Yeah.
We still get people that will contact us and say, I remembered you in 87, and I was at a concert, and you stopped and talked to this little old lady, and
Wow.
he was always that way with his fans, and with his fame, he was never he never took it for granted,
Yeah.
and he always said, I don't know what I did to deserve this. So I think that there was God hovering over
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
and just waiting to pour out some more abundantly.
That's right. Waiting
And,
for him to see.
Yeah, pressed down and
I mean, I
shaken
see.
together, and
Yeah. I
Yep,
see.
Luke.
That's right. I see your mama's prayers all over you at that
Yeah.
point in your life, and
A lot.
I imagine you've got some of her spirit, like that sweetness that I'm hearing about, that humility.
Yep.
And when he left Marshville, that's what he took. He didn't take his daddy's, mean side. He took his mama's sweet side.
Yeah.
And he's always been that sweet, kind, gentle
Yeah.
human being. He had a band that they were like family, and he had a band. His fiddle player, actually, Dave Johnson, was he found him when he was in Charlotte
Yeah.
Yeah.
back in the 70s, I guess.
Yeah.
Is when he found Dave Johnson, and Dave was with him up until the day he had the stroke.
Wow.
He was there about 34 years.
Yep.
That is so
And
special,
it
especially
is.
for the industry where there's so much turnover.
And he had, LD he had for 20-some years, and
Yeah.
Lance Derry, all of them that came stayed unless there was a health issue,
Yeah.
or family issue.
Yeah.
So that spoke volumes for Randy
Yeah.
as an entertainer.
That is awesome.
And we still stay in touch with him today.
Yep.
So,
I have,
Yeah.
that is so awesome. I've picked up on it from other interviews, I guess a recurring theme here and there throughout your life of struggling with the bottle like your daddy did and others in your family history. And at that point in your life, when you're getting more famous, does it get easier or harder to avoid the bottle and the temptation? Did you drink more during that time? Like more than you did when you were struggling and working at the palace and all that?
No.
No?
No, he wasn't drinking
No.
at that point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had given it up.
Yeah.
By the time he left Charlotte,
He'd given it up
yeah, he'd given it up.
Yeah.
in his 20s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
On your own? Cold
Yeah.
turkey?
Cold turkey. Lib was very, very integral in that, as far as, making him accountable
Yeah.
and scheduled, and this doesn't fit into, what we're planning here. So he was able to let go of that
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Until there started being problems in their marriage. But it was just,
I see.
he gave
okay.
it up, and that was where he was able to, I guess, get to the point that he got with his music and his number ones. And I think he had a great understanding that that was interfering with what he was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So,
So you quit drinking for a lot of your 20s, and then you got signed and you went big time.
Yeah.
You started back?
No.
You didn't. At what
not through
point?
not through your 30s and
Yeah.
At what point did
40s.
that become an issue again? When the marriage began to fall apart?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a dark time of your life.
Yeah.
When you look back on that time now, do you see God's hand?
Oh, yeah.
You do,
Yeah.
even through the struggle.
Yeah.
I guess even in bringing y'all together.
Yeah.
yeah,
Isn't that something, how he works?
Yeah.
sure. I mean, when we least expect it,
Yeah.
but he's there.
When you noticed something different about him on stage that night, was alcohol part of that? Or was it just sadness? Or
It was emptiness. It was
Yeah.
sadness. Like I said, she wasn't there, and she was somewhere in Mississippi or something with a guy she brought in
Rod.
from Ireland,
Yeah.
and they became very close, and
Yeah.
less of Randy.
Mhm.
So it made it really hard for him because
Yeah.
this guy was traveling with them.
Yep.
He was living with them.
Yeah.
He was everywhere.
yeah, that's not
And I think that he was being told one thing, but something else was going on.
good. Yeah.
Yep.
And he started figuring some of this out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where the dark space was, I guess. So when I saw him at Billy Bob's, it was just the presence and the expressions and the things that were not Randy Travis,
Of course.
as I had seen him for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And so that's where it really bothered me.
And what a gift even that God led you there that night.
Yeah, because I wasn't planning on it at all.
And what would
Yeah.
have come of Randy had you not intervened in his life at that point?
Well, I can't take any of the credit for that. That's
bet-
when God's hand is really, really holding him.
He'll
you
use
know?
us if we let him. And I bet
Yeah.
I bet Randy would give you some of that credit.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's always fascinating to look back after a dark period.
Yeah.
When you're in it, you're just thinking, what in the world
You're right.
what have I done to deserve this? And then you come out of it and you realize God was there
Yeah.
all along.
That's exactly right. You gain understanding.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because, like, the kids or whatever, or friends, when something bad happens to them, I guess I just say, whatever's going on, it's in God's hands. He's in control.
Yeah.
But in a year from now, you're going to look back and go, what was I thinking? You know, that's just the way it is when we go through difficult times. And you know, if you have a challenge or something, and you don't know what to do with it,
Yeah.
then life is like a staircase. You got to take the first step. You got to keep taking
It's the hardest
steps.
one to take.
You know, onward and upward,
Yeah.
and eventually you'll get to the top, and that's when you gain your understanding. And now I get it,
Now
and
you
that's by the grace of God. So, when we've seen a lot of that in our lives, separately and together. So, you know, it's you face a challenge and you figure out a way around it, through it, or over it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
yeah, we had a lot of sorting out to do, and we,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know what we would have done without leaning so heavy on God during that period of time of transition, and then in 13 when the stroke hit. So that was hitting a brick wall, doing 100 miles an hour, and your whole life changes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in an instant.
Right. So before that all happened, and you're starting to talk, and you're getting sweet on each other, and you're figuring that out. How serious did y'all get as a couple before the stroke? Like, where was the relationship at that point?
Hot mama.
What'd he say? Hot mama?
Hot mama. Yep.
I love it. You were all in.
Yep.
Yeah, we were all in by then. I mean, there was no doubt.
Were y'all engaged
Yeah.
at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the stroke came. That was in, you know, it was just, the good thing about it, though, when I guess we'd known each other, you know, our families had known each other. We'd been in touch for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I'd already fallen in love with the man, the person that I saw. His kindness, like we were talking about, you know, his humility. There was nothing showy about him. And he was always just a great person, you know, just had such character. And those were the things that I loved, and I loved the people that were around him that loved him.
Yeah.
Because you can't be that beloved if you're not doing something right.
Sure.
And he was always kind and gentle, and so it wasn't hard to fall in love with him, you know, in a relationship. So for 3 years we would talk hours and hours and hours, and that, you know, I look back on that, talking about retrospect, and I'm so glad that I did, because I certainly didn't know that 3 years down the road we'd never be able to talk again, you know, in full sentences and to communicate like we did before. But we talked all the time. We would talk for hours and hours, and he'd tell me his stories.
Wow.
And I wish that there was more time, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't God's will, and that's okay, because I did get to. I did get to absorb as much as I did in 3 years about his experiences and his likes and his dislikes and his heart.
Yeah.
So I thank God for those years, but I wish there were more.
Yeah.
And there may be.
There might be.
We're not ever going to
You never
give up
know.
hope. No.
Yeah.
No.
That's awesome.
Never going to give up hope.
Yeah. So, so 2012 was obviously kind of it was a dark moment with the arrest and all that stuff. And I see people in ministry, you know, both pastors and people I'm ministering to, dealing with sort of the cancel culture world we're in now, and people, the shaming that people do online, and how everybody's worst moment lives forever now
Yeah.
on Google or wherever.
Right.
Did that make it harder to move on from that moment in your life, knowing that people just won't let you forget it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you wish you could have that one back.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And now it's out there, and it can be such a graceless world
Yeah.
sometimes. And I'm just grateful that God had given Mary to you by then
Well,
to help get you through that
Yeah.
time. But I just wondered how you both of you all have dealt with the way the world is about stuff like that, and how we deal with our worst moments and the judgment and shame people put us through.
It's very unfortunate, because I think that we are measured by the way we measure others,
Yeah.
and that's part of the Luke 6:38 that he loves so much.
Yeah.
But and I don't think people understand that that's really the way it is when we get to where we're hoping to go, and we're having to answer some questions. And why would we expect somebody else's perfection when we're so imperfect ourselves?
Yeah.
So
How did you react to the news of Randy's arrest, and when you found out, how did you react, and then how did you love him through that?
well, there wasn't anything that was going to make me fall out of love with him. That wasn't even in the back of my mind or the front of my mind. But they called about 4 in the morning from the sheriff's department in Sherman, Grayson County, and they told me that they had him there. And I'm thinking, no, he's over here. No, he's here. And it just broke my heart. But of course, you've got 1,000 things going through your mind. You're not sure how he got there, what happened. You don't know anything. But he evidently, well, there was a lot of stuff going on with his ex-wife, who was also his manager.
Yeah.
So there was just so much, woven together there that had to get unwound, and it was painful and very difficult, and there wasn't fairness, on the playing field at all, and because all he did was sing and make music for all of these years, probably 30. Well, they were married 19, but together about 29 years. And so she was the one that was, in charge of all that.
Yeah.
So the things that he was finding out were very painful.
Yeah.
It was, and I got to see those, so there was a part of me that understood, or tried to understand why he reacted the way he did.
So all that pain was manifesting.
And it was just, and it was just bubbling.
Yeah.
So he's trying to deal with all that, and at the same time, trying to continue with his career.
Yeah.
And there was such a clash.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to be creative. It's hard to be. It's hard to move forward. It's hard to put one foot in front of the other when you've got something beaten down on you like that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you did.
And we got through it.
You're here.
Yeah.
Praise God.
We got through it.
Yeah.
So talk about 2013 and the stroke, and just how that happened and where you were and what exactly.
We were here at the house, and 4th of July, the kids all came up and their friends and dogs and everything else. And we had, they were swimming. We cooked burgers, hot dogs. We had fireworks. Everything was normal. July 5th, we had a meeting. That was a Friday. We had a meeting here in the dining room. About 8 people from Nashville, to kind of figure out what our game plan was going forward.
Yeah.
Pulling out of those dark days, and things were starting. It's the time when we worked with the Avett brothers. So that was about that time frame. So there was a lot of good things on the horizon. There was a lot of hope and reason now. So we need to, just follow that dream, follow that path. So doors were opening up. God was opening up doors, and it was that Saturday we had that big long meeting, and that night he told me, he said, I don't feel real good. And he goes, I'm going to go to bed. And I thought, well, that's strange, because he's never, he worked out that day, probably 3 or 4 hours over here in the gym. But then that evening after that long meeting, he said, my chest hurts and congestion. So I took him to the emergency room, and they checked his lungs, and he had walking pneumonia, they said. So they gave us all of the breathing treatment and antibiotics and sent us home. Well, the next morning he woke up, and he didn't sleep a wink. He couldn't get air, he couldn't breathe. So he said, I can't breathe at all. Took him there to the emergency room again, and they said they x-rayed, and both lungs were completely full,
Oh my gosh.
just overnight. And so they tried to insert, his heart was shutting down. And they tried to place an impella through his groin to assist the heart. And he flatlined.
Wow.
So once we got him back from flatlining, they took him about 2.5, 3 minutes. And I said, we got to get him to the heart hospital because the heart was just, it was so bad. Blood pressure going up, heart. It was just, so we took him to the heart hospital in Plano at Baylor. And Dr. Michael Mack met us there. He was one of the, he was one of the ones that started the heart hospital. He met us there. It was about, by this time it was 5:30 in the morning, our third hospital. And he said, we got to put him on ECMO immediately or we're going to lose him.
Put him on what?
ECMO, which is life support.
Yeah.
And so they took him straight into surgery, and they go through the groin. They went through the right groin and placed whatever it is that they have to place for ECMO. So he was basically on life support at that time.
Wow.
And he was in a coma. And it was, everything was happening so fast. Dr. Mack, after about 24, 48 hours, he said he had viral cardiomyopathy.
Wow.
It wasn't the lungs, it wasn't pneumonia. So he had gotten a virus, it hit the heart and shut the heart down. So then the lungs fill up and
My goodness.
the heart tries to give out. He had an ejection fraction of about 5 or 10, which is really close to dying. A lot of people do die at that.
Yeah.
Then 72 hours after we had gotten to the heart hospital, he was starting to come out of the coma, and they noticed he had had a massive stroke. Probably through a clot when they brought him back after he flatlined. Sometimes it'll throw a clot and went to the brain, caused a massive stroke. So then we were dealing with that, and then it led to emergency brain surgery within the next 4 hours. So all of that in 2 days.
And Randy, you don't have any memory of any of those events, do you?
No.
You remember going to the hospital,
Yeah.
and that's about it?
Yep.
Wow. It must have been terrifying, Mary.
Yeah.
It was terrifying.
You go from walking pneumonia to stroke and
Yeah,
brain
surgery.
Yep.
yeah.
What were the doctors telling you at that point during the surgery? And what were they telling you about his chances, his future?
1 to 2% chance of survival if we did the surgery, and 0 if we didn't. I mean, they have it down to such a science, and Dr. Mack was wonderful. He was, but this was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said by 6 o'clock we'll lose him if we don't try to relieve some of the pressure.
And even if you do relieve it, 1 to 2%?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 1
mean-
to 2 if the surgery is successful without losing him, because to go into surgery, you have to take him off of ECMO. He couldn't go in. He couldn't be on life support and go through the surgery, so they had to take him off of the ECMO, and that's what Dr. Mack said. If his heart doesn't start beating on its own, he won't make it, obviously. And then if he throws another blood clot, then we have a whole nother issue. So there was he said there were 7 things, and he could name them, that had to go perfect, or we weren't going to have him. But
How did you react? Because some people in that situation go full warrior mode, like, let's do this. Other people melt into...
no, I was in full warrior mode. When they said he had 1 to 2% chance, all I could think was that's 100% over 0.
Wow.
So those were pretty good odds over, anything over 0 was
That's right.
good at this point. And I knew what a strong person he was,
Yeah.
mentally, physically, spiritually. Because by 2013, I mean, his heart belonged to God. His
Really?
heart belonged to Jesus, and he studied his Bible every day and prayed. And I mean, he was right in the right place. And I know that when he was laying there in the hospital rooms, even when he couldn't speak, I know that he was having his conversations with God.
Yeah.
And I think they made a deal. right? And my prayer was just please God, let me have him back any way, shape, or form. Just please let me have him back. Waited too long, waited all my life for him,
Yeah.
and 3 years was too short. So, we were just it was hard. It's not something that you're ever prepared for. There's no book written. There's no class taught that gets you. I mean, that prepares you for something that's so abrupt and so life changing.
Yeah.
And especially when you're making calls for somebody else's life. It's one thing for our own to say, this is what I need, what I want, but he couldn't. And I think, that's when you just kind of follow God's will, because I certainly didn't do it on my own, and I would not have had that strength on my own. And I know that that's where it was coming from. So it was up to me to listen. And like I said, I know Randy was praying.
Yeah. What happened
He was
after
praying.
that surgery? Did Randy wake up and everything was fine, or was there more?
Well, it took him. They left him in a semi-coma state for a while, and I think until the swelling went down. And I'm sure there was a lot of pain. I mean, I know that. It was a hard thing to go through, and it was. It's still painful to relive it when you think about the moments and how the minutes seem like years, and and one day after another, just another thing kept going wrong, and I didn't know how much Randy could handle or tolerate.
Yeah.
Because he was the one that was laying there in pain and IVs everywhere, and he had intubations, and he had tracheotomies, and
Wow.
it was hard to see someone you love going through something like that. It's very painful.
Yeah.
But he did it. I mean, he and God had an agreement, and they both held to it. So
At what point, did you actually have to say, "Don't unplug my
I did.
fiance"?
Yeah, I did. After 2 weeks, they said, "Mary, we need to probably think about letting him go, because there's too many things going wrong and not enough right." But
So the doctors came to you and said, "We might need to think about."
yeah,
It
they
wasn't
had-
just like other friends or acquaintances. It was the doctors that
it was
came
the
to
doctors. Yeah,
you and said it might be time.
yeah.
For
They
you to
took me
let
in
go.
in a conference room, and we had some business friends there, and Jeff Davis, his road manager, and Kyle Lenning, his producer all of his career. It was probably several of us in there too, and that's when they said that they told us, they said, we've pretty much exhausted, all of our remedies. We don't know what else to do, so we think it's time to maybe, consider that. And I was at that point mad. I mean, when they said that, I was angry
At
at them, because I didn't feel like they were trying, I just didn't feel like they'd given it everything they had.
yeah.
Because I was with him 24/7, for 5.5 months there in the hospital.
And it just feels inhumane to be in a room like that, to be told something like that, in a cold, callous kind of way, and you're there fighting. You're fighting. Both of you are fighting. Day in, day out for months at a time, and those days in hospitals turn into like years. I mean, it feels like
eons.
years. and to have someone come along who you hope would fight with you say it's time to give up, it's got to be tough.
Yeah, it is. But he's the one that gave me the answer. I
How?
left that room and I went to the room, his room, and I was standing by his bed on this side and held his hand, and I know that he heard me because he responded. I just asked him if he wanted, to keep fighting, if it was, because if he didn't want to, then, but his want to was there.
Wow.
And he squeezed my hand, and like I said, he was in a coma state, semi-coma, I think. and he had a little tear that fell down.
Wow.
And then the second tear fell, and I got up and I said, okay, baby, we're going to fight. I love you. I'll be right back. And I went back in that room and I said, he is not ready to give up, and we're not giving up.
Yeah.
So it was the next day that Dr. Toll, the third doctor, they do rotations by the week.
Yeah.
And he was the third doctor, and I sat down and told him what had gone on. And he said, I'm not going to let him go. I just lost George Jones about 3 months ago here. I'm not losing Randy Travis.
Wow.
And I saw that look in his eye, and I knew I finally found somebody that was going to give me some fight,
Yeah.
that was going to give us hope and a chance. And so he changed all the antibiotics and all of the routine that had been going on for 2 weeks. And in about 5 days, he came to me. He said, Mary, I think he's turning the corner.
Yeah.
And I had told him, I said, I just want to get him back to Texas. And so 11th day, about the 11th day, then we came home to Texas. I mean, I'm so happy about so many things, but yeah, those were tough days,
Yeah.
and you'd rather hurt than somebody you love hurt, and so we left. It was early one morning. We were leaving Baylor Rehab, and he had a bag of clothes, laundry, whatever, and I was pushing the wheelchair, and I remember him taking his left arm, and he went, whoo, like, bye. And it was just so, it was so remarkable, but got him in the car, and we came home, and
Yep.
that was 7.5 years ago,
Yep.
and we haven't been back to the hospital yet.
Really? How long did it take you to start walking again, Randy?
I would say it was probably, it was 2 months maybe. I
really?
I've got it all documented because I was trying to, keep it kind of journaled as we went.
Yep.
I just haven't gone back to visit that journal,
Yeah.
But
How do you make sense of these doctors saying he'd never walk again? Did they just not know who they were dealing with?
I guess not.
Yeah.
They
It's
didn't,
Randy Travis.
they didn't take that into consideration.
Yeah.
But
That is so awesome.
yeah, it was, the rehab part of it was, there was tiny steps, and it's amazing how much joy you get out of something so small.
Yeah.
It took us about 2 months to learn A, just the sound A. And from there, just words kind of started forming exponentially.
Randy, was your mind functioning normally? You just couldn't say the words? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Aphasia.
That's
It's
got to
called
be
aphasia.
frustrating.
Yep.
And there was some apraxia where he didn't understand at first, but then we got through that. So really the only thing left was the aphasia,
Yeah.
where the brain and the mouth don't connect. So he knows everything. He knows everything going on. He's very detail oriented
Yeah.
still, but he just can't express himself. And he's done well with it. We've kind of developed our own language.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only. And when we came home from the hospital, he had vision problems
Yeah.
for about 6 to 9 months, and but that came back.
Does
Another-
music still mean the same to you now as it always has? Was it harder for you to listen to music and enjoy it? Really?
At first, it was hard. He didn't want to hear him.
He didn't want to hear himself? Why not? Was it too hard?
Yep.
And I think until you come to the reality, your new norm now,
Yeah.
and you come to, it's got to hurt. I know that.
Hey.
I know that's what I do for a living, and I may not be able to do that again. And it's just something you have to. Takes a while.
Oh, I imagine.
It was. I know it was hard for him. It was hard for me.
Yeah.
But we started listening to music, and he would enjoy Merle, and George Jones, and some of the ones that he was always so fond of.
Yeah.
And it was probably a year and a half before he wanted to hear Randy.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and these are
So
puppy dogs.
you made it home in 2014. At what point did
And we got home Thanksgiving 2013.
Oh, 2013.
We went in 1st of July and got home 3rd week of November.
And at what point did Randy make an honest woman out of you?
That was in 2015.
All right.
It was Christmas.
Really?
And our daughter, Kavanaugh, worked with Randy and taught him how to say, "Will you marry me?" As we'd already decided to do that before, but then we had to, we just put it off for a while.
Sure.
But so she taught him how to say that, and it was Christmas. We had the Christmas tree in here actually, and we were sitting on this sofa.
Really?
Yeah, it's just kind of whoa! It all happened right here. But he pulled out or Kavanaugh got it from out from under the tree, and she gave it to Randy, and he proposed
Yeah.
right here on the sofa.
Wow.
And that was 2015, or Christmas 2014, and 2015 we got married.
Yeah. Randy, did you ever have any doubts about Mary?
No.
No. Should I ask her the same question about you?
Yeah.
Mary,
No
was
doubts.
there ever a moment where you
No.
just thought, this is too much, this is too hard?
No, not at all.
You're a saint.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, saints are sinners that just keep going, you know. And no, it was never a question. I think about that. It's funny because people will say that. I said, no, it wasn't even an option.
Yeah. Never entered your mind.
No, and before the stroke, and all of the things that were going on, you would have thought that would have been when you'd say, I can't handle all this, and he could have done the same thing because we were both going through the same.
Yeah.
We were both enjoying the same pains, but no, it was never even a question to me.
Yeah.
Not before the stroke, and certainly not after the stroke. That wasn't an option.
That is awesome.
As long as he was here, I was going to be there. So, yeah, he's just going to have to put up with me some more.
So 2014 you get, 2013 you get home, 2015 you get married, and 2016 is the big induction.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
How'd y'all find out that that was going to happen?
Well, that was February of 2016, February or March. Tony Conway had called us, who's his manager in Nashville. And he said, when y'all are here, I can't remember if it was February or March. I want to say it was late February, maybe the 28th of February. When y'all are here, we need to go over to the CMA office because they want to. They're just going to do a little interview where they'll ask you all yes and no answers, and so we went over there with Tony and the lady that was head of the CMAs. They had little chairs set up, so it looked like they were going to do that. And she walked out and she said, "You're not really here for an interview. We just wanted to ask you if you would become our newest member of the Country Music Hall of Fame."
That feel good, Randy?
A lot.
It was beautiful. It was amazing.
You didn't see it coming at all?
No, we had no idea.
Wow.
No, we didn't have any idea at all. I cried.
Did you?
He cried. He said yes. So she said, "I told you it'd be a yes or no answer." That was
awesome.
pretty special. And so then on October was the induction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's when I cried.
oh,
That was special,
yeah,
Randy.
when he took that mic.
Well,
and sang
first there was
Amazing
the Garth
Grace.
Brooks stuff, and Garth saying nice things about you and what you mean to the country music world and your legacy in the country music world, and how I think he said you are the only man he can remember who took the music industry and turned it back on itself, and created this 180 where it goes back to what it should have been and got bigger than it ever was. And he credited you with that, Randy.
Yeah.
Did that feel good?
A lot.
God's a wonderful man.
Really?
Oh, wonderful.
Another one of those who
Yeah.
is who he is.
Yes, he is who he is. He's
Yeah.
great for humanity, and I mean, what a wonderful person to
Wow.
induct Randy, to hang
Yeah.
his medal around his
Yeah.
neck.
Well, and then Randy accepts the award and he breaks out in song
Yeah.
Yeah,
to everyone's surprise.
everybody's
Yeah.
surprised.
Amazing Grace.
Yep.
Did
Yeah.
you
Nobody
know
knew.
he was going to do that, Mary?
Well, yeah, we had talked about it, and we had started singing in therapy over here at Select in Denton. Tracy was head of marketing for the Rehab hospital, but they didn't have music therapy either. Baylor didn't have it. Nobody has it, and I just can't comprehend that. But so Tracy was a music major, and she would bring her little organ keyboard
Yeah.
at lunchtime into the room, and she'd just start playing the
Yeah.
music. So we started forming words better through music than in conversation, because that's what he was so used to. So we started working on Amazing Grace there, and just like we spoke about a minute ago, his daddy died the Saturday before the induction, and we were heading for Nashville, but then his brother Dennis called him and said, Daddy died today or this morning, and so we headed straight to North Carolina, and all the way to North Carolina, and all the way from North Carolina to Nashville, we went over and over and over Amazing Grace again and again, and so he was singing it so well in the car that I just thought we should incorporate that into, the speech that I gave on his behalf.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you back the voice of Randy Travis.
Oh, wow.
And it was dead silent, because we had a lot of friends and family from here that had no idea we were going to do it. They
Yeah.
had no idea. And one friend, Charlie, he said, I thought, oh my gosh, Mary has lost it. He can't sing amazing. Does she forget that he had the stroke? He's like, all these things were going through my mind. And Randy took that mic and started singing. And he said, I just started bawling. I looked over, and Charlie Daniels with that big old hat pulled out a handkerchief that looked like a picnic tablecloth. And he said, I looked down, and the Oak Ridge boys are down there crying, and everybody's wiping tears. He said it was just, and it was so magical. And we didn't know for sure whether we were going to do it until about 30 minutes before the ceremony started. And I asked him, I said, do you feel comfortable? And he said, yes. So he did it. He was just, there again, the hand of God saying, we can do this, son.
Yeah.
And they did.
Wow.
Yeah, all 4 verses. So it was beautiful. I mean, it was just, it's so memorable.
Yeah.
I can't even explain it. So
Were you nervous, Randy?
No.
You weren't nervous?
No.
You had seen a few stages and
A lot.
auditoriums in your time.
yeah, it was interesting when you put that microphone in his hand, how it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
And that's
Even after everything he'd been through.
Yep.
It's like riding a bike.
Yep.
Came right back.
yeah.
Yep.
Made grown men cry.
Oh, it did. It was pretty emotional, and we still talk to people that say, "Oh, I was there," or whatever, and they're like, it was the most magical, most touching,
Yeah.
event I've ever seen. So it was just beautiful.
It was Amazing Grace.
It was
Like
Amazing
that's
Grace.
what made it so emotional, is that it was more than just a song, it was your testimony.
Yeah. It was Amazing Grace.
You stood there because of God's amazing grace.
Tender Mercies and Amazing Grace.
Yep.
So back in, was it 2001, your baptism, Randy?
Yeah.
I mean, you were a grown man. That was a choice you made.
Yeah.
Did you feel God calling you to do that?
Yeah.
You thought it was time?
Yeah.
Mary, did Randy talk to you about that decision? at all in that time in his life? What was going on at that point that made him take that step?
Well, as far as his career, it was, what is it called? It was hotter than a $3 pistol. I mean, he was touring in the late '80s, early '90s, 200 and some odd days out of the year. He had he'd done that for 4 or 5 years or something, and he said, I just needed time away
Yeah.
from it. So he didn't retire from music. He just stepped back. He didn't tour for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Then he was called back to do a concert to reopen the MGM in Vegas, because I guess he had done work with them, and they said, well, we're building a new MGM, and when we get it done, we want you to be the first concert.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, Randy was kind of on a sabbatical, but he said, I knew that I'd told him I would, so I had to go back. I had to put a band together. Didn't have a band or a crew or anything. So they threw that all together, and he had his concert. But in this time that he was away from music, he was doing his acting. He had started doing some parts in westerns and movies and TV, and so now he was kind of doing both of them.
Yeah.
And this time that he was off, he said, I spent a lot of time learning the Word and making that really a part of my fabric.
Yeah.
And so and when he came, when he came back from all of that and he started the music again, he said that I knew I was ready to be baptized.
Yeah.
So they did, I think you did it that night. So didn't Pastor Harless do it Sunday night service?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
He just,
Yeah.
and he was, till the day he couldn't read anymore after the stroke, he would read the Bible
Yeah.
every morning, usually over some fruit and his protein shake and the Bible.
Yeah. Being in ministry, you see people who make a decision like that, get baptized, they decide to follow Jesus, make him the Lord of their life. And I think some of them feel like, well, now my life's going to get easier. And most often it doesn't. The struggles keep coming, or the consequences from the past keep chasing you down. And that can be really demoralizing for somebody to say, I came to you, Jesus, and things just got worse. And so what am I doing wrong? Or are you really there? And that kind of thing. And after 2001, I guess you had some tough years down the road, right? After that, with your first marriage and everything that entailed, and then obviously the stroke. At any point along the way, have you said, "Why, God? Like, are you there?"
No.
You have not. You've never doubted His presence with you
No.
through it all. Have you struggled at all to make sense of the struggle?
Yeah.
Once in a while,
Yeah.
just the trying to figure out what God is doing here. So your doubts weren't, are you there, God? You didn't doubt God's presence or His goodness. You just tried to figure out where His goodness was
Yeah.
in the midst of all the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier, that people think, well, if I turn my life over to God, then everything's going to be perfect and it's all just going to be a ribbon of highway. God never promised us that.
That's right.
And He told us there'd be tough days. And the closer we get to Him, the harder the devil has to work. And he shows up often.
Yeah.
So then he's not going to let go either. So there's that constant that you can be assured of. So he knows, we all should know as Christians, since it's all not smooth and we go down bumpy roads, doesn't mean that God's not there.
Yeah.
And if we ever go astray, we know that we can go back and always find Him right where we left Him.
Right.
And I think Randy was certain that whatever we were going through or he was going through was God's will. I just need to know what to do now. And I don't think he ever doesn't want us to need him or want him or ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I think that's part of being a Christian is just knowing and being sure that he'll be right there with you
Yeah.
through the tough times.
Yeah.
And that's character. He's building you for bigger and better.
Right.
So
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell me what the foundation does and why that's important to y'all.
there's great causes out there
Yeah.
that people invest in that are wonderful, but ours was based around things that we experienced, which was the lack of detection of the viral cardiomyopathy. There's so little known about it, and often it's called, they will call it pneumonia.
Yeah.
You know, when it's really not pneumonia, it's just when the heart starts shutting down, the lungs fill up. And same with pneumonia, if it's truly the pneumonia and the lungs filling up, then the heart starts stressing. And those two work so hand in hand together. And for the first 48 hours, that wasn't recognized, and that was
Critical.
where our problem came in.
Yeah.
And that's what viral cardiomyopathy does. It does its damage in 48 hours, and then it's gone.
Uh-huh.
And so, just the identification and the diagnosis, early diagnosis of viral cardiomyopathy, so that something can be done about it sooner than later. And then the other is the stroke rehabilitation, and dealing with the aftermath of stroke, because it's all so soon, so sudden that
Yeah.
you really don't know what to do, and everyone is different.
That's right.
Every stroke is different because there's billions of brain cells, and depending on which ones get damaged, is what you're left with
Yeah.
when it's over. So
And every moment matters, right?
every
right
moment
when you're having a
matters.
stroke.
Yeah.
So that's the mission of the Randy Travis Foundation
Well,
in a nutshell?
there's a third wheel, and that's the music and children. Making sure that children have access to music and
Right.
instruments, because then you start hearing about school districts that are trying to cut budgets.
Yep.
And the first thing they cut is arts and music.
Yeah.
And I think it's tragic because there are some kids that learn from that side of the brain that's the arts and the music, and
Yeah.
that are not, it's not math and science and history, it's the creative side. And if you start taking that away from the children that learn that way, now you've got a batch of kids in the classrooms that people say, well, they're just dumb, or they just can't make their grades, or they're not studying. But that's not the right angle.
Yeah.
Because they're tilted different, which is great. What would we do without, artists and musicians and creative thinkers?
Yep.
And that's where we're heading when we start taking that away from the children at such a young age, and the children that can't afford instruments. So what we'd like to do is even find, if it's if it's little, it'll grow. It can be a grain of sand on the beach, but it matters.
Yeah.
And to get instruments in their hands and availability of lessons, because those things, unless people have, some money left over
That's
after
right.
everything, all the living expenses, they don't get that.
That's right.
And I think back on Randy and the Garth Brooks and the other people that have changed our lives through their music.
Yeah.
And where would they be if they had not had that guitar in his hand?
Right.
So,
And where would we be?
where
without,
would we be without it?
Yeah.
Without music in our lives or art?
Tell you what.
It's a frightening thought. So
That's right.
kids deserve that.
I agree. We're turning into machines. Like
Yeah.
before COVID, it shut us down. We were running ourselves into the ground and running our kids into the ground.
Yeah,
And it's important to stop and sing sometimes.
exactly. Yeah.
Have you heard from anyone else who has experienced the same medical crisis or a similar medical crisis that Randy did, that maybe is appreciative of the foundation and y'all making people more aware?
A lot of people.
Really?
Yeah, I've talked to several, and most of them are women that call or contact me or message me or whatever, just, this is what I'm going through and this is what happened. And, I guess they just look for hope.
Yeah.
And I get the great part about it is that because of who Randy is, people take notice.
Yeah.
And then you think of the people that may not be a Randy Travis, so nobody notices, and how lonesome that must be.
Right.
I was fortunate because I was his wife, that they could call me or get in touch with me, and I could give them some words of hope and wisdom. But then there's others out there, and they don't know where to turn. So it's good to be able to share our walk and just let people know that, we don't look for huge changes.
Yeah.
All we want is the giant baby steps, the little bitty things that matter so much. And it's good because it makes you appreciate those things.
Yeah.
We're going back to what you were talking about, and everybody's more this, more this, more this, and what's it really for?
Right.
We don't take it with us, and so it's the little things that we've come to enjoy and appreciate. And I want other people, just don't ever give up. If people say, well, he's been out of the hospital 6 months, but he's not talking and he's not walking and he's not. I said, don't give up.
Wow.
It took us a long time to get where we are. We're not where we want to be, but we're darn sure glad we're not where we were. So.
And coming from you and what you've been through, that means the world to somebody who's going through it now.
Yeah.
Like versus somebody like me or somebody that hadn't been through that particular struggle.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing to hear it from somebody that's been through it.
Yeah.
And you're still
And it's
here.
hard. It's hard to get through it.
Of course.
It's you don't get the manual to go with something
That's
like
right.
that, and
Yeah.
you kind of make it up as you go.
Yeah. So I heard earlier that Luke is, or a passage in Luke is among your favorites. Randy, are you able to get back into the Word now, and are you all able to read it or listen to it together?
Yeah.
You're back to reading?
He
No.
does.
Not the reading, but you can listen.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. It's a safe
See, I
answer.
think that Bible's like music, though. People will say, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite song of Randy's? I'll say the last one I read or the last one I heard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because they're all so good,
That's right.
and they all speak to you at a different place in your life.
Right.
Yeah.
The Bible, you just, and it's a God wink, it's a God thing, because you'll be going through something and you're like, I don't even know where to look for help, and you open it, and book just opens up, the Bible opens up to just where you needed to be.
Yeah.
And the same with a song.
Oh, man.
We've had one of his fans, became a fan, but this little kid that he was, I guess, down in the bottom and was going to commit suicide, and had the gun with him. He was heading down to the lake, dirt road, the whole 9 yards, wrote a suicide letter. And one of Randy's songs came on, and he said, I stopped the car and I cried. And he said, and I listened to the song again, and he even had 2 ways of committing the suicide in case one didn't work, he said. And I stopped and I listened to that song, and he said, and it spoke to me and everything I needed to hear. I went back, and now I'm married, have 3 beautiful kids.
Yep.
Wow.
It's just in a song, in a moment, and that's...
That is powerful.
It is. It's wonderful. I mean, and we get to hear those stories. That's what's even more wonderful.
That is amazing. What an impact you've made, Randy.
It's pretty
Thank you.
special.
Are you proud of your legacy and the impact you've made in country music?
Yeah.
You've got to be.
Yeah.
And he always said, if I can change one heart, lighten one load, or take away one bad day for someone, I've done my job.
Yeah.
And that's the way you've certainly done that a few times over.
More than a few. You've done it for me.
He's done his job.
I mean, I like I said, grew up listening to so many of your songs, and you can't listen to Deeper Than the Holler and not smile. Like you can't. Your day's better at
True.
that point. And I wondered, even as you were talking, Mary, about how music hits you different every time, and even the song, on the other hand, about marriage and how that might hit y'all different now. even with what you've been through. It's like on the one hand, we got all these problems, but on the other hand,
Yeah.
is that wedding
Yeah.
ring.
Yep.
And it's a beautiful thing. I cannot get over what a awesome turn of events Fool's Love Affair is.
Oh,
And how that came about. It's a song you recorded, Randy, how many years ago?
1984.
How many years is that ago? 36 years ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it resurfaced
Yeah.
over the past couple of years. And Fool's Love Affair is taken off.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Does that feel good to you, Randy?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People want to hear that voice. People want to be reminded. Randy's still around singing these songs, and it's a good song.
Yep.
I can't believe it stayed in the shadows for so long.
Yep.
Yeah. On the shelf in a box.
What's that been like for you, Mary, to see this song?
Well, it tickles me to death just to hear his voice
Yeah.
on the radio, and just to hear his voice again. First time I heard it, I cried again because it's just
Did you?
yeah. And though it was recorded in '84, it was still new.
Yeah.
And so when Charlie Monk had called us and he said, I found this demo that Randy did in '84. Would y'all be interested in getting it to Kyle and getting it kind of mixed? Or he said, I think Kyle said he had to add a couple of instruments to it and stuff. It
Wow.
already had background vocals on it,
Yep.
which is really unusual. But I said, well, sure. Well, then he couldn't find the master of it. It was just the little demo cassette tape. Kyle said, well, I need the multi-tracks or the master. Well, I don't know where that is. So Charlie was moving out of his offices on Music Row, kind of slowing down, retiring, and he was taking some boxes of stuff to Hall of Fame to be archived. And he said in this one box that outfell this Fool's Love Affair master. It was about a year and a half ago. So he got it to Kyle. Kyle remixed it and did everything he had to do to it, and that's what you hear today.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
It's one of those things you can chalk up to just being a coincidence, but
No, it's a God thing.
I think y'all have experienced
God
too
wink.
many coincidences,
Yeah.
quote unquote, to think that they're accidental.
Yep.
God showers us with little graces here and there.
Yeah.
And when we're faithful enough to have our eyes open, we'll see that it's Him,
Yeah.
that it's always
Yes.
been Him.
Yep.
Thank y'all for the time today.
Thank you.
Truly grateful.
Thank
Well-
you for being here.
We'll be including y'all in our prayers.
Yeah. Thank
and,
you.
for your continued recovery.
Yep.
Who knows what God can do.
Yep.